The deep hum of the Veridian dreadnought filled the vast expanse of the bridge, reverberating through the thick alloy floor like the heartbeat of an ancient beast. Outside the viewport, the endless void stretched dark and infinite, punctuated only by the distant twinkling of a billion stars. But none of those stars held the quiet promise of life this one did. The human fleet had arrived, piercing the Veridian space with an arrogance that stirred old fears long buried beneath layers of history. Vol'tal stood motionless, his slender limbs rigid as the spectral blue light of the nearby star cast shifting shadows across his angular face. His multifaceted eyes, reflective, like liquid crystal, scanned the incoming human vessels, each one a stark contradiction to the ancient myths inscribed in the archives of the Veridian Council. The legends spoke of the demons, towering, bipedal creatures of unmatched ferocity and destructive power, wiped from the galaxy's memory eons ago. For centuries, Veridians had believed these creatures to be little more than cautionary tales, relics of a savage past best forgotten. Emma Rodriguez, the human commander, stood on her bridge as well, her olive skin glistening with the soft sheen of recycled air, her dark eyes unblinking behind the protective glass of her helmet. Her ship bore the scars of 1,000 skirmishes, and the weary set of her jaw betrayed the cost of countless battles fought in the name of survival. From her perspective, the Veridian vessels were an enigmatic, welcome committee graceful, with their deep green hulls glimmering faintly under the star's light, but cold and implacable. The first skirmish erupted without warning. A sudden flurry of warning alarms shattered the tense silence aboard the Veridian dreadnought. Red holographic symbols blinked frantically, overlaying the starfield with streaks of hostile fire. The human fighters surged forward like a swarm of predatory insects, their plasma cannons spitting violet bolts that seared the vacuum between the fleets. The Veridians' response was swift, their own weapons, intricate coils that emitted crackling arcs of emerald energy, lancing out with surgical precision. Vol'tal's heart raced beneath his exoskeleton. The battle was a brutal ballad of light and sound. He could feel the vibrations of impacts through his boots as nearby vessels shuddered under enemy assault. As a commander, every motion had to be calculated, every decision a razor's edge between victory and ruin. Yet beneath the tactical considerations, an ancient terror lurked, the recognition of something primal and terrifying in these humans. Elsewhere on the Veridian dreadnought, Vashdor, the chief scientist, peered into the ship's vast data core, his multiple eyes darting between archaic star maps and coded linguistic fragments uncovered from the ancient archives. The text spoke in whispered tones of a species that had once spread chaos across the galaxy, leaving planets scorched and civilizations shattered. The demons, humanoid in shape but monstrous in spirit. Now here were their descendants, alive and fighting, embodying the very nightmares that had haunted Veridian folklore. Smoke drifted through the corridors like spectral fingers, mingling with the acrid scent of burnt circuitry and ionized air. The bridge was thick with tension, the sounds of distant explosions pounding through the ship's frame. Vol'tal's gaze flickered to the holoscreen displaying casualty reports. The wounded were being evacuated, their pain masked by the sterile hum of medical systems. Yet the Veridian medics hesitated whenever human soldiers were brought aboard. The unease was palpable, a silent refusal that gnawed at the unity of the fleet. Ryan Cross, a human infantryman, had been thrown clear from his shattered transport pod, his body battered and broken by the violent collision. He lay sprawled on the cold metal floor of the medical bay, his breathing shallow, his vision swimming with darkness. The sterile white lights above cast harsh shadows on his blood-streaked uniform, the sharp scent of antiseptics mingling with the iron tang of his own blood. Nearby, Veridian medics moved with measured efficiency around injured Veridian soldiers, their touch practiced and precise. But when it came to Ryan, their movements faltered. Their multifaceted eyes flickered with uncertainty, their tentacle, like limbs hesitating inches from his writhing form. A low murmur echoed in the sterile chamber, a language thick with unease and fear. The medic's internal protocols clashed with the primal, dread etched deep into their genetic memory. To tend to these humans was to awaken memories of an ancient terror, to confront a nightmare whose shadow still stretched across their collective psyche. Vol'tal watched helplessly, his voice steady but tinged with frustration, as he issued silent commands through the comm link, urging the medics forward. The wounds could be healed with time and advanced technology, but the refusal to treat the humans held deeper significance. It was a fissure in the fragile alliance, a reminder that some fears cannot be so easily quelled. Outside the medical bay, the battle raged on. Explosions bloomed like unnatural flowers in the void, sending ripples of debris drifting endlessly through the darkness. The Veridian dreadnought shuddered as a plasma torpedo slammed into its aft section, the hull plating glowing red, hot before emergency bulkheads sealed off the breach. Vol'tal's limbs tensed in response, his mind racing through defensive maneuvers, tactical retreats, and counter-assault options. But even amidst the chaos, his thoughts returned again and again to the humans, the living embodiment of the demons from the ancient tales. He recalled the legends told by the elders, savage warriors who fought with unyielding rage, capable of withstanding wounds that would fell lesser beings. They had been scourges of the cosmos, their arrival heralded by destruction and despair. And now, as Vol'tal surveyed the human fleet's relentless advance, he could not deny the echoes of those stories reflected in their fierce determination and brutal efficiency. The Veridian Council had debated the humans' arrival in hushed chambers for cycles, weighing the promise of alliance against the peril of awakening old nightmares. Vashdor had argued for cautious engagement, advocating scientific study to uncover the true nature of these strange newcomers. Vol'tal, seasoned by countless campaigns, felt the weight of command pressing down like the gravity of a dying star. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered by scars both visible and unseen. In the dim light of the bridge, Vol'tal's thoughts turned inward, wrestling with the paradox of their situation. The humans were undeniably formidable. Their resilience, their unpredictability, their capacity for pain and violence defied the calm logic of Veridian reason. Yet they were also desperate, survivors clinging to an uncertain future in the cold expanse. The Veridian medics' refusal to treat human wounded was not mere prejudice or xenophobia. It was a visceral reaction, a remnant of ancestral memory manifesting as an instinctive shield. To heal the humans was to acknowledge their kinship with the demons of legend, to confront a truth too dark to fully accept. As Ryan cross-drifted in and out of consciousness, the distant sounds of battle echoing faintly through the medical bay's reinforced bulkheads, the quiet tension between species simmered beneath the surface. The Veridian dreadnought, a symbol of ancient power and advanced technology, was locked in a struggle not only of weapons but of memory and fear. In this vast galaxy, where stars burned cold and civilizations rose and fell like tides, the arrival of the humans had stirred something primal. The demons of myth were no longer just shadows in the archives. They were here, walking among the stars once more. And the Veridians were forced to reckon with the legacy of a terror they had hoped was lost to time. The battle for understanding had only just begun. The dim glow of the Veridian command hub flickered unevenly, casting long, wavering shadows across the cold metal walls. Vol'tal stood silently, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the pale, bluish light as he watched the grainy holo feed flicker on the central display. The image showed a battlefield strewn with motionless forms, Veridian soldiers and humans alike. But what gripped his attention What stirred a deep unease beneath his exoskeletal carapace was the way the human bodies behaved. The wounded were not still. Unlike the Veridians, whose physiology betrayed immediate weakness beneath ruptured membranes and severed limbs, the humans writhed, convulsing, clutching shattered limbs, their flesh oozing blood yet refusing to surrender. Even when pierced through the chest, or when bone was shattered, their bodies pulsed with a disturbing resilience, as if pain and injury were mere irritants rather than terminal conditions. Vol'tal's mandibles twitched involuntarily. He had witnessed countless skirmishes across the quadrant, seen species fall to ruin under his command. But nothing matched the stubborn vitality of human soldiers. To the Veridians, death was immediate, or at least, salvation from suffering was swift. Yet these humans, these new invaders from the distant blue planet, seemed to defy the natural order with their unyielding flesh. In an adjoining chamber, Vashdor, the lead Veridian scientist, pored over the data streaming in from battlefield medics. His multiple eyes narrowed behind translucent ocular lenses that magnified the tissue samples transmitted via nanocarriers. The biological reports were unlike anything in Veridian's xenobiological archives. Human tissue exhibited regenerative properties thought impossible, cellular structures that repaired themselves swiftly, immune responses that resisted infection aggressively, and an unusual density of neural synapses that seemed impervious to the paralyzing toxins Veridian medics used routinely. Vashdor's voice, a gravelly hum in formal Veridian tonalities, broke the silence of the lab. Commander Vol'tal, the human physiology is anomalous. Their wounded do not exhibit the expected systemic failure. Rather, their cells rally against injury with remarkable tenacity. It is as if their very flesh fights to survive, refusing to shut down. Vol'tal turned, his dorsal plates gleaming under the sterile lights. And the medics? Are they able to stabilize them? Negative, Vashdor replied. Our treatments have minimal effect. We attempted to treat a soldier with hemorrhagic trauma. Standard coagulative agents had no impact. Moreover, our analgesic compounds seem to cause distress rather than relief. The commander's claws clenched. Distress? Explain. The humans respond to our sedatives with increased agitation. Their vocalizations, agonized but defiant, escalate. It's as if our remedies are perceived as threats, not aid. Vol'tal's antenna twitched, his mind replaying fragments of the battle. He recalled the human soldier, Ryan Cross, who had been struck during the skirmish on Takala IV. Ryan's uniform was shredded, and his left leg mangled beyond recognition, yet he refused to lie down. Instead, he dragged himself through the scorched earth, gritting teeth despite the blood pooling beneath him. The Veridian medics approached cautiously, their instruments extended to scan and administer care. But Ryan's response was violent. He flailed, snarled in his guttural human tongue, and struck out with unbroken spirit. His flesh, torn and bleeding, remained stubbornly alive, muscles straining to push him forward. Vol'tal swallowed a surge of conflicting emotions: admiration, confusion, and a prickling fear. The ancient archives had warned of a species of demons, once thought myth, beings of unyielding flesh and indomitable will, scourges that left devastation in their wake. Until now, those were stories told to frighten young Veridian hatchlings. Was it possible that this myth had returned cloaked in human form? Across the battlefield, the acrid scent of burnt ozone and scorched biomass lingered, mingling with the sharp tang of oxidized blood. The sky overhead was a bruised purple, heavy storms rolling in like a curtain about to fall. The metallic clang of collapsing structures echoed faintly as the survivors struggled against the dying light. Vol'tal's gaze locked on the figure of Emma Rodriguez, the human commander. She moved with deliberate fury, rallying her troops, her face streaked with grime and sweat. Her eyes burned with fierce determination, an unspoken promise that no wound, no matter how grievous, would extinguish their fight. The Veridians had never encountered such willpower. Vashdor scanners pinged softly, interrupting Vol'tal's observations. "Commander, I have material from the field hospital. Analysis of human tissue under trauma reveals microfractures that heal rapidly. Their immune response is aggressive, targeting pathogens with precision. It's as if their bodies are built to endure beyond normal limits." Vol'tal exhaled a rasping breath, mandibles clicking softly in thought. "Have you referenced this with the ancient texts?" Vashdor hesitated before nodding. "Yes, the descriptions match the demons of Veridian mythos, creatures said to be unkillable, their flesh impervious to pain and decay. They were defeated only through traps of containment and containment technology, not through direct combat." A chill ran down Vol'tal's exoskeleton. The implications were staggering. The humans were not mere newcomers, they were echoes of a terror once thought vanquished. He recalled the aftermath of the last encounter on Takala IV. Despite the Veridians' best efforts, the wounded humans refused evacuation. They rejected medical aid, their bodies thrashing against treatment. The medics reported high casualty rates but low mortality. Humans survived injuries that would have been fatal to any other species. Vol'tal's claws clenched tighter. The medics, trained to save lives, were now recoiling in reluctance. Not out of malice, but out of uncertainty and fear. He strode to the viewing port overlooking the triage area. Rows of injured humans lay on cots, their chests rising and falling in ragged rhythms. Some grasped metal splints, others pressed makeshift bandages soaked with their own blood. A few whispered to one another, sharing grim reassurances that transcended language barriers. The Veridian medics hovered nearby, their instruments at the ready, yet hesitation marked every movement. Vol'tal's internal voice echoed with a singular thought. These creatures refused to yield, not just in battle, but in suffering, unyielding flesh, unbreakable spirit. The realization dawned fully. Treating them as conventional wounded would be futile. Worse, it risked provoking reactions that could endanger the medics themselves. The humans' regenerative vigor was both a marvel and a menace, challenging the Veridians' understanding of life and death. Vol'tal retreated into his chambers, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. He activated the memory banks, summoning the ancient audio logs encrypted within the alien archives. The grainy recitations told of the demons, beings of endless endurance, whose suffering was a battleground itself. The texts warned that medical intervention often exacerbated their ferocity, triggering violent episodes that turned healing into a torment. He closed his eyes, images flashing of battlefields past, of fallen comrades torn anew by the human's savage vitality. The silence of the chamber was broken by his own steady breathing, the rhythm a fragile counterpoint to the storm raging outside. His thoughts spun on the same axis: how to confront an enemy who refused the very mercy of death. How to win a war where survival itself became a weapon. Vol'tal reached a decision. No, a necessity. The Veridian medics would not treat the wounded human soldiers. Not because of disdain or cruelty, but because attempting to heal them was to invite chaos. Their flesh was a fortress built against pain and demise, their biology an enigma that defied conventional care. To aid them was to risk losing oneself to the fury of their undying will. He sent a directive to all medics and field units. Human casualties were to be contained and observed, not treated. Extraction protocols would prioritize removal over recovery. The wounds of the humans were a battlefield unto themselves, a domain the Veridians dared not enter. As the storm broke over the plains of Takala IV, lightning tracing jagged scars across the sky, Vol'tal stood resolute. He understood now why the Veridian medics would not treat the wounded human soldiers. It was not out of neglect, but out of a profound respect for an ancient terror reborn. A force beyond healing, beyond mercy. The humans were demons, and their unyielding flesh was their weapon. And so began the fragile truce between caution and confrontation, a tenuous dance in the shadow of legends that refused to die. The air hung thick with a metallic tang, a bitter sharpness that clung to the Veridian medical bay like a lingering storm. Vol'tal stood rigid, beneath the low hum of the fluorescent lights, his many eyes scanning the array of human injuries laid out on the sterile slabs before him. The soft hiss of the atmosphere recycling systems mingled with the faint, irregular beeping of monitors, a cold symphony underscoring the chaos of war. It was here, in this room of white antiseptic and cold steel, that Vol'tal's second revelation unfurled like a dark cloud, twisting the fragile hope they had held for the humans. He had expected wounds, broken limbs, shattered armor, the dull scars of battle. But what greeted him instead was something far more disturbing. A pattern of fury etched not just in the flesh, but in the very essence of the soldiers themselves. The medics had brought in Ryan Cross's body first, his chest heaving with ragged breaths, despite the bullet wounds that riddled his uniform. Yet, it was not the physical damage that caught Vol'tal's attention. It was the raw, unyielding rage that seemed to radiate from the man, a fire simmering beneath broken skin. The flicker of monitors cast long shadows across the floor, painting the room in muted shades of green and gray. The scent of antiseptics mixed with the faint iron tang of blood, rising in a sharp wave to Vol'tal's olfactory sensors, triggering memories he had long buried. The ancient archives had described creatures like these, demons. The texts had named them, beings whose wrath was a weapon, as deadly as their claws. It was as if that primordial fury still pulsed within the human soldiers, a relentless force that shattered the calm discipline of the Veridian ranks. Vol'tal's many eyes narrowed, the fine hairs along his mandibles twitching in silent agitation. He recalled Vashdor's earlier warnings, the scientist's voice trembling as he recounted the ancient legends, discovered in the ruins beneath Veridian Prime. The stories had spoken of a species whose combat instincts transcended mere tactics. They fought with a savage intensity, a tactical fury that consumed reason and mercy alike. Veridian medics, trained in the art of healing and preservation, were unprepared for the brutal reality hidden beneath the human exterior. The room's sterile walls seemed to close in, the soft whir of machines blending into a low, ominous drone. Emma Rodriguez's voice echoed faintly through the calm. Link, her words clipped and urgent as she coordinated the evacuation of the wounded. Vol'tal's gaze flicked to her holographic projection, the human commander's stern expression a mirror of the relentless grit embedded in her soldiers. There was no surrender in her eyes, only the cold promise of relentless battle. Vol'tal stepped closer to Ryan's side, his limbs moving with a cautious grace born of years of disciplined practice. He reached out with his slender appendages, fingers brushing lightly over the ragged wound on the soldier's side. The flesh beneath his touch twitched, the muscles coiling like a spring ready to snap. There was no pain, no pleading in Ryan's eyes, only a blazing fury that seemed to burn through the medic's careful calm. It was an instinctive reaction, Vol'tal realized, a defensive storm so fierce that it defied the very essence of healing. His internal systems registered elevated adrenaline markers, heart rates spiking beyond normal human parameters. This was not merely a physical ailment. It was a psychological tempest, a tactical fury that transformed injury into a weapon, pain into power. The Veridian medics recoiled subtly, their practiced hands faltering as they sensed the growing tension. The ambient light flickered, shadows dancing like restless spirits across the walls. Vol'tal's mind raced, dredging through ancient texts and recent observations, trying to reconcile this primal rage with the cold rationality of Veridian combat doctrine. The humans were unlike any species he had encountered, warriors who bled hatred and fought with the fury of the damned. As he withdrew his hands, A low growl rumbled from Ryan's throat, the sound raw and guttural, a visceral warning that cut through the sterile silence. Vol'tal's antennae twitched in alarm, the sound resonating deep within the chamber, stirring a primal unease among the assembled medics. It was as if the soldiers carried within them a beast unleashed, a tactical fury that corrupted the very act of healing. The memory of the recent battle surged through Vol'tal's mind. The chaos of gunfire, the stench of burning fuel, the screams of the dying mingling with the relentless thrum of combat drones overhead. The humans had fought with a reckless abandon, charging headlong into death with no regard for their own survival. That fury, that raw, unbreakable will, was a weapon as lethal as any plasma rifle. Vol'tal's gaze shifted to the other wounded humans arrayed along the bay, each one a testament to the brutal tenacity of their species. Broken bones fused with bruised flesh, yet beneath the surface simmered the same unyielding rage. Their eyes burned with a fire that refused to be quenched, their bodies trembling not just from pain, but from the fierce determination to survive, to fight back, to win at any cost. It was then that the second revelation crystallized within Vol'tal's mind. Not just the physical horror of the wounds, but the psychological tempest that rendered his medics helpless. The Veridian art of healing relied on patient cooperation, a trust between healer and wounded. But the humans, with their tactical fury, rejected that trust instinctively. They fought against the very hands that sought to mend them, their bodies tense, their minds consumed by an unquenchable fire. Vol'tal's thoughts spiraled inward, a maelstrom of regret and frustration. The ancient archives had warned of these creatures, of their capacity for destruction and fury. Yet, no record had prepared him for the brutal reality of their pain. The way it fueled their rage, turned healing into a battlefield of its own. To risk tending to a wounded human was to invite that rage, to place his medics in the path of a storm they could neither predict nor control. The flicker of lights dimmed momentarily, shadows stretching across the floor like grasping fingers. Vol'tal inhaled deeply, the sterile scent of antiseptic sharp against his senses. He could hear the faint murmur of the Veridian medics exchanging uneasy glances, their movements slowing as if weighed down by an invisible burden. The room felt colder now, less like a sanctuary of healing and more like a cage holding back a furious tempest. He thought of Emma Rodriguez again, her unyielding command, her soldiers' relentless charge into the fray. These humans were warriors shaped by fury, their tactical brilliance wrapped in a storm of raw emotion. To treat them was to enter that storm, to risk being consumed by the very fire that drove them. Vol'tal stepped back from the slab, his limbs aching with the weight of understanding. The second revelation was clear. To heal a human soldier was to confront the tactical fury within, a force that made even the most skilled Veridian medic hesitate. The archives had spoken of demons, but now Vol'tal knew the truth. It was not the wounds themselves that terrified the medics, but the savage spirit that lived beneath the broken flesh. Outside the medbay, the sounds of battle had faded into a tense silence. The hum of starships and distant explosions gave way to the low murmur of uneasy anticipation. Vol'tal's gaze lingered on the sealed doors, the boundary between the sterile calm of healing and the chaotic fury of war. He could not forget the growl from Ryan Cross, the fire burning in the eyes of his wounded comrades. In that moment, Vol'tal understood why the Veridian medics would not treat the wounded human soldiers. Not out of cruelty or disdain, but out of a profound fear of the tactical fury that transformed healing into a deadly gamble. It was a revelation that chilled him deeper than any physical wound, a truth etched into the very heart of their encounter with humanity. The room seemed to hold its breath, the quiet broken only by the steady beep of the monitors and the faint, distant echo of gunfire. Vol'tal's mind raced with implications. How to protect his medics, How to confront the human's fury without losing their own discipline? The answer was nowhere to be found in the ancient texts or the cold logic of strategy. He glanced once more at Ryan Cross, the human soldier whose survival balanced on a knife, edge between pain and fury. The man's chest rose and fell with a shuddering breath, eyes flickering with a fierce light. In that gaze, Vol'tal saw the terrible spark of something ancient and unstoppable. The tactical fury was not just a weapon, it was a force of nature, a flame that refused to be extinguished. And the Veridian medics, for all their skill and training, were powerless against it. Vol'tal exhaled slowly, the realization settling like a weight upon his limbs. The second revelation was complete, a dark truth that would shape the future of their alliance and the fate of the human soldiers. To treat them was to face the fury within. And to survive, the medics would need more than medicine. They would need to understand the fire that burned beneath the flesh, or risk being consumed by it. The hum of the medbase swelled around him, a cold reminder that in this war, the greatest enemy was not the wounds themselves, but the fury that refused the Veridian research facility lay dormant beneath the jagged cliffs of Arxelon Prime, nestled in a cavernous expanse where shadows danced with the flickering luminescence of bioluminescent fungi. The air was thick with a cool dampness, redolent of ancient stone and lingering ionized energy, an eerie calm that belied the turmoil within. Vol'tal stood alone in the core chamber, the cavern's crystalline walls refracting light into spectral patterns that played across his mottled green skin. His many eyes, normally sharp and alert, now fixed on the archaic holo, codex flickering before him. The third revelation was unfolding, and with it, a truth that gnawed relentlessly at his understanding of the humans he had been so quick to condemn. Vol'tal's mind raced back to the initial encounter. The humans had arrived like a storm, their ships breaching the galaxy's edge with unprecedented speed and audacity. The Veridians had first hailed them as potential allies, until the ancient archives whispered warnings, warnings painted with terror and dread. These demons of old, the archives said, were not mere myth, but real entities that had once stalked the stars with ruthless savagery. The Veridian medics' refusal to treat wounded human soldiers was grounded in this fear, a visceral instinct rooted deep in their species' collective memory. But now, as Vol'tal delved deeper into the latest data, a different story began to emerge, one that challenged everything. The flickering holo codex revealed scans of human physiology interwoven with data logs from the battlefield. Vashdor's meticulous reports accompanied the images: wounds treated and left untreated, survival rates, physiological responses to trauma. Yet, within the clinical statistics lay something far more profound, a narrative etched not in numbers, but in resilience and connection. Vol'tal's gaze lingered on a series of thermal imaging sequences captured during the firefights. The human soldiers moved with a synchronicity that defied explanation, their bodies instinctively shielding comrades, their actions seamless and instinctual even under fire. He recalled Emma Rodriguez, the human commander, her voice steady as she ordered a retreat amidst the chaos. But it wasn't just her commands that held the unit together. It was how the soldiers responded, not as individuals, but as parts of a cohesive organism. The Veridians had considered humans fiercely independent, yet here was evidence of a collective bond forged not by biology, but by something deeper and more enigmatic. Vol'tal's multifaceted eyes scanned the data again, coming to the crux of the third revelation. The unbreakable bonds that existed between human soldiers were more than psychological, they were physiological. The scans revealed an extraordinary phenomenon. When a human soldier was wounded, the neural and hormonal responses of nearby comrades surged almost instantaneously. Pain signals, stress markers, and healing hormones generated by one individual rippled through the group, an unseen web of shared endurance and recovery. It was as if the humans were linked by a biological conduit that transcended mere communication, a form of symbiotic empathy that activated in moments of crisis. The implications were staggering. The Veridian medics' refusal to treat wounded humans had been based on fear of contamination, fear of the demonic influence that might infect their own kind. But what if the real danger was not the humans themselves, but the strength of their bonds? What if these unbreakable connections made human soldiers impossible to treat using conventional Veridian methods, because their survival depended not on isolated healing, but on the collective energy of the unit? The medics' sterile procedures could be disrupting this delicate balance, severing the invisible threads that reinforced human resilience. Vol'tal's mind reeled with the weight of this insight. The echoes of past conflicts, where Veridian forces had suffered mysterious losses after attempting to treat human casualties, now took on new meaning. The failures were not due to medical incompetence or xenophobic superstition. They were the result of a fundamental misunderstanding of human physiology and social biology. The human strength lay not only in their individual bodies, but in the intricate interplay of their emotional and biochemical connections. A low hum vibrated through the cavern as the research station's power systems adjusted to the data influx. Vol'tal exhaled slowly, the air trembling faintly as his muscles tensed. He imagined Emma's face, the fierce determination, the quiet moments of camaraderie shared between her and Ryan Cross, the young soldier who had been grievously wounded in the last skirmish. Ryan's survival against all odds had baffled the Veridians, his recovery defying every prognosis. Now, Vol'tal understood that it was the unyielding bond with his comrades, those unseen currents of shared pain and hope, that had kept him alive. The Veridian commander's thoughts drifted to the battlefield's sensory tapestry, the acrid scent of burnt plasma mingling with the copper tang of blood, the staccato rhythm of gunfire punctuating the strained breaths of combatants, the metallic clang of armor against jagged terrain. Amidst this chaos, the humans moved not as isolated entities, but as a singular force, their spirits intertwined in a dance of survival and sacrifice. This was no mere military tactic, it was an ancient, primal force born of shared struggle, a testament to their evolutionary tenacity. Vol'tal's attention snapped back to the present, as the cavern's entrance shuddered under the rumble of distant activity. The Veridian medics, clad in their antiseptic white armor, moved cautiously into the chamber. Their faces were marked by a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, their usual disdain replaced by uncertain wonder. They too had witnessed the inexplicable recoveries, the stubborn defiance of death in the human ranks, and now they sought answers. Yet, as Vol'tal watched them approach, he felt a surge of resolve. The time for fear was over. The third revelation demanded not avoidance, but understanding, a willingness to see beyond the myths and confront the truth. The human soldiers were not demons to be shunned. They were survivors bound by a force that defied Veridian logic and medical doctrine. The medics began their analysis, their instruments probing the physiological data with cautious precision. Vol'tal observed how their skepticism gradually softened into awe as the patterns emerged. Neuronal pathways firing in unison, hormonal cascades triggered by emotional proximity, immune responses amplified by group dynamics. It was as if the very essence of human healing was communal, a network of life forces intertwined in a way that transcended species boundaries. The realization settled heavily on Vol'tal's shoulders. To treat human soldiers effectively, the Veridians would need to abandon their rigid protocols and embrace a new paradigm, one that honored the unbreakable bonds between humans. It was not enough to mend flesh and bone. They had to acknowledge the invisible threads that wove the human spirit together. As the cavern's bioluminescent glow deepened, casting elongated shadows, Vol'tal felt a profound shift within himself. The ancient fears that had governed Veridian actions were dissolving, replaced by a cautious hope. The humans' strength, their resilience, their unity, their unyielding will to survive, was not a curse but a gift. To reject it was to deny the potential for a new alliance, forged not in fear, but in understanding. Outside the facility, the wind howled through the rocky canyons, carrying with it the distant echoes of battle cries and the steady cadence of marching feet. The galaxy was vast and fraught with peril, but here, in this subterranean sanctuary of light and shadow, a new chapter was beginning. Vol'tal knew that this revelation would ripple across Veridian society, challenging long-held prejudices and opening the door to cooperation. Yet, the path ahead was uncertain. The medics' minds resisted change, their training steeped in caution and suspicion. The Veridian commanders grappled with the implications, how to integrate these new insights into a war effort already strained by conflict and loss. But Vol'tal, standing amidst the flickering holograms and humming machinery, embraced the truth with unwavering clarity. The third revelation was not merely about human physiology, it was about connection, empathy, and the indomitable bonds that could bridge even the deepest divides. In the face of cosmic darkness and ancient fears, these bonds offered a glimmer of light, a reminder that survival was not just the strength of the individual, but the unbreakable unity of the many. As the Veridian medics resumed their work, now with renewed purpose, Vol'tal's eyes lingered on the image of Ryan Cross, the wounded soldier whose heartbeat pulsed not in isolation, but in harmony with those who stood beside him. The story of why Veridian medics would not treat wounded human soldiers was no longer a tale of fear and rejection. It was a revelation of resilience, a testament to the power of unity in the face of annihilation. And in that quiet, cavernous chamber beneath Arxilon Prime, the ancient archives fell silent, their warnings transformed into wisdom. The Veridians had glimpsed the truth of the humans, a species not to be feared as demons, but to be understood as bearers of an unbreakable bond, a living testament to the enduring spirit of life itself. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burning ozone and scorched metal. The battlefield lay sprawled beneath a bruised sky, a tapestry of chaos stitched with flashes of gunfire and the guttural roars of wounded beasts. The once pristine Veridian stronghold was now a shattered shell, its gleaming spires twisted into grotesque sculptures by the relentless assault. Amidst the smoke and ruin, the figure of Ryan Cross emerged, a solitary beacon of grim determination against the encroaching darkness. Vol'tal's eyes, multifaceted and gleaming with unease, tracked the human's staggering advance. The commander's breath came in shallow bursts, each inhale tasting of blood and desperation. Dust swirled in the heavy air, catching the dying light in mad spirals that seemed to mock the transient nature of life on this forsaken ground. Around him, the Veridian medics had withdrawn, their elongated limbs twitching with suppressed horror, their luminous skin dimmed by a dread that no words could soothe. Ryan's uniform was torn and stained, a canvas of grit and crimson that bore testament to every step forward carved from agony. His breathing was ragged, each gasp a defiant roar against the pain racking his body. The wound on his side pulsed like a living thing, hot and unforgiving, but he pressed on, driven by a will that seemed almost otherworldly. The alien medics recoiled further, their bioluminescent veins flickering erratically, as if the very sight of his injuries threatened to unravel their composed facade. The ancient archives had spoken of this, of creatures whose vitality defied reason, whose endurance bordered on the grotesque. These demons, as the Veridians had named them long ago, were said to possess a tenacity that mocked death itself. And now, here he was, a human soldier embodying that legend with every tortured step. Vol'tal's mind raced, a storm of conflicting orders and primal fear. The tactical protocols screamed at him to pull back, to preserve what remained of his forces. Yet beneath that, a deeper instinct urged him forward, compelled by a stubborn reverence for courage, even if it came wrapped in the terrifying enigma of humanity. He forced his voice steady, a harsh rasp against the din. "Medic units, stand down." The command echoed hollowly. "Leave the human." The words hung heavy in the charged atmosphere. Around him, the medics hesitated, their compound eyes flickering between instinct and doctrine. The Veridian code was clear: treat the wounded, preserve the living. Yet these humans, these indomitable, infuriating humans, defied every tenet they held sacred. Their bodies healed wounds that should have been fatal. Their spirits flared in the face of oblivion. It was an affront, an unspeakable anomaly in the grand calculus of survival. Ryan's steps faltered, and he sank to one knee amidst the detritus of shattered machinery and smoldering husks. His fingers clawed into the scorched earth beneath him, drawing strength from the very soil that had witnessed countless battles before this one. The world around him was a kaleidoscope of pain and fury. Flashes of light from distant explosions, the metallic taste of blood mingled with the acrid smoke that stung his nostrils. His mind drifted momentarily, memories surfacing like fragments of a shattered mirror. The faces of comrades lost, the promises made beneath alien suns, the quiet moments of hope amid relentless war. Each memory was a tether, anchoring him to a purpose beyond pain. He gritted his teeth, summoning reserves of will that should have long since withered. Vol'tal approached cautiously, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. He knelt before the human, observing the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the shallow rhythm of life clinging stubbornly to existence. The Veridian's mandibles twitched in an expression that might have been pity, or perhaps a reluctant admiration. The ancient fear was palpable, yet beneath it, a grudging respect blossomed. "Human," Vol'tal murmured, voice low and uneven, "your species. It is unlike any we have known. Your endurance borders on myth." Ryan's gaze lifted, locking onto the alien's multifaceted eyes. There was no fear there, only a fierce, unyielding resolve. The soldier's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, a raspy breath escaped, a whisper carried on the smoky air. "The myths. Sometimes they're real," Ryan seemed to say without sound, his eyes burning with unspoken truths. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air, a volley of plasma bolts streaking through the haze. Vol'tal's head snapped up, instincts urging immediate action. The battlefield was still alive, a merciless beast that would not be tamed. Shadows twisted and lunged, figures darting between debris and fire. The enemy had not relented. Vol'tal grabbed the edge of a broken wall, steadying himself as the world spun. His gaze darted between the human and the chaos unfolding. The medics, though trembling, lingered at the periphery, caught in a liminal space between protocol and fear. The commander's jaw clenched, the weight of decision crushing down. He could order a retreat, leave Ryan to whatever fate awaited. Or he could defy the ancient edicts, risk all to save a creature that had become a symbol of something profound. Of resilience, of defiance, of a spark that refused to be extinguished. The ground trembled beneath a distant explosion, dust and debris raining down like a grim benediction. Vol'tal's mind raced, calculating odds, weighing sacrifices. But in the depths of his being, a flicker of understanding ignited. A recognition that transcended fear and history. With a sharp bark of command, he summoned the medics forward. They hesitated no longer. Their limbs extended, tools humming to life as they rushed to the wounded human's side. The air buzzed with a symphony of biotechnological devices interfacing with flesh and bone, a delicate dance of alien precision and human fragility. Ryan's eyes fluttered closed, the pain momentarily eclipsed by a surge of relief. The medics worked with practiced efficiency, sealing wounds that had once seemed impossible to mend. The Veridian's eerie glow bathed him in a strange light, alien and yet strangely comforting. Vol'tal stood guard, scanning the horizon as the battlefield continued its savage ballet. Every second was a stolen breath, a fragile moment suspended between destruction and salvation. The acrid haze began to thin, revealing the battered silhouettes of surviving soldiers, both human and Veridian, caught in a tenuous truce forged by shared survival. The commander's thoughts lingered on the ancient archives, on the tales of demons that had haunted Veridian nightmares for millennia. They had feared these creatures, these humans, as something beyond reckoning, monsters of endless endurance and unbreakable will. And now, faced with the undeniable truth, the fear was tempered by something else: awe. The medics finished their work, retreating with a reverence that bordered on worship. Ryan's chest rose and fell with a steadier rhythm, life rekindled amidst the ruins. The human opened his eyes, the fire within them dimmed, but not extinguished. Vol'tal stepped forward, extending a limb in a gesture of respect. It was a silent acknowledgement, an unspoken bond forged in the crucible of conflict. The battlefield around them was scarred, but in this moment, a fragile seed of understanding took root. As the last embers of the day faded into a twilight thick, with the promise of both endings and beginnings, the Veridian commander knew that the legends were true. The demons were real, and they had changed everything. The clash of species, the agony of war, and the terrifying endurance of humanity had converged here, on this broken field, and in that convergence lay the fragile hope of a future rewritten, not by fear or myth, but by the indomitable spirit of a soldier named Ryan Cross. The sterile hum of the Veridian medical bay was a stark contrast to the chaos of the battlefield just hours before. Soft white lights glowed from panels embedded in the walls, their luminescence casting long shadows on the smooth, metallic floor. The faint scent of antiseptic mixed with the sharper aroma of ionized air, a constant reminder of the cold, clinical environment designed for healing. Yet, beneath this facade of calm, a storm of uncertainty churned within the minds of those who had gathered here. Vol'tal, Vashdor, and the humans they had come to study, and, reluctantly, to aid. Vol'tal stood motionless beside the central examination table, his gaze fixed on the subdued form of Ryan Cross. The human soldier's chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Wounds that had once bled profusely, now covered with a lattice of Veridian fabric. The sight was both a victory and a vexation. The Veridian medics had refused to treat wounded human soldiers initially, not out of cruelty but out of deep-seated fear. Fear born from ancient myth and painful experience. Vol'tal's multifaceted eyes reflected the flickering data streams projected above the table, detailing Ryan's vitals and the progress of the new healing protocols. He recalled the tales inscribed in the ancient archives, stories of a species that had once torn through the galaxy, sowing destruction with an insatiable hunger. The descriptions had fit the humans too closely for comfort. The same resilience, the same relentless tenacity that had once made the Veridians' ancestors tremble in their starships. But now, here in this room, the ghosts of the past met the reality of the present. The humans were not demons. They were flawed, certainly, but they were also capable of cooperation and even compassion. Vol'tal's thoughts raced through the nuances of this revelation as he observed the silent rise and fall of Ryan's chest. The battle scars were deep, yet the healing was progressing. The medics, under his direction and in collaboration with Vashdor, had devised a new protocol, one that did not merely treat the humans as alien entities to be avoided, but as sentient beings with unique physiology requiring tailored care. The air was thick with a quiet tension, punctuated only by the soft whirs of medical drones hovering nearby. Vashdor, the Veridian scientist whose curiosity had ignited this breakthrough, moved closer to the data display. His slender fingers traced the holographic interface, adjusting parameters and monitoring biochemical markers. This was no simple procedure. The humans' regenerative mechanisms were unlike anything the Veridians had encountered, demanding synthesis of both species' medical technologies. Vashtor's mind was a tempest of breakthroughs and doubts. He had spent countless cycles studying the human biology, painstakingly correlating their rapid clotting factors and accelerated cell regeneration with the advanced nanite-infused treatments the Veridians favored. The resultant synthesis was fragile, an intricate dance of alien biochemistry and ancient technology. If this protocol succeeded, it could change the course of interspecies relations forever. If it failed, it would reinforce the fears and prejudices that had held them apart. Beyond the reinforced glass of the observation window, Emma Rodriguez stood silently, her posture rigid, yet her eyes betrayed a glimmer of hope. Commander Rodriguez had borne witness to the horrors of war and the tenacity of her people. She had fought blood and survived on hostile worlds, her resolve forged in the crucible of conflict. But this moment, this fragile nexus between suspicion and acceptance, was unlike any battlefield she'd faced. She trusted the Veridian medics in this room, even as the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears hung heavy in the air. The first sign of progress came subtly. A gentle rise in Ryan's oxygen saturation, a faint but steady pulse in his damaged limb. Indications that the bio-fabric was integrating with his tissue, rather than rejecting it. Vol'tal's antennae twitched as he observed these changes. It was a moment of triumph, but also a reminder of the meticulous care required to ensure the protocol's success. One misstep could trigger catastrophic immune rejection, or worse, reignite the ancient fears that had kept them apart. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors filled the silence, a mechanical heartbeat accompanying the fragile dance of life. The medics moved with practiced precision, their instruments emitting soft glows as they probed, scanned, and nurtured the wounded. There was no boastful fanfare here, only the quiet determination that comes from knowing that lives hung in the balance. Vol'tal allowed himself a brief internal sigh, a rare concession to the weight of responsibility. The Veridian reluctance to aid human soldiers was not mere prejudice. It was a legacy of trauma, etched into the very fabric of their culture. Their ancestors had faced the demons once, and the scars were more than physical. They were etched into the collective memory, a warning passed down through generations. But the present demanded evolution, adaptation, and above all, understanding. Hours passed like minutes as the medics worked tirelessly. The ambient lighting shifted subtly, mimicking the cycle of a distant Veridian sun, a small comfort in the sterile environment. Slowly, the tension that had gripped the room began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. Ryan's eyelids fluttered, a weak but unmistakable sign of consciousness returning. Vol'tal's multifaceted eyes narrowed in concentration, analyzing every micro-movement, every pulse. The human soldier's breathing steadied, and a faint color returned to his pallid skin. This was no longer an experiment. It was a testament to what could be achieved when fear was confronted with knowledge. The Veridian medics gathered around the examination table, their collective focus a symphony of hope and science. Vashtor's voice, usually reserved and precise, carried a rare note of warmth as he noted the successful integration of the bio-fabric with Ryan's tissues. The healing accelerates beyond initial projections, he observed, suggesting compatibility we had not dared to anticipate. Vol'tal nodded solemnly. This was the breakthrough they had sought, a new healing protocol that transcended old fears and prejudices. It was a bridge between species, a symbol of potential unity, forged in the crucible of adversity. Outside the medical bay, the familiar murmur of Veridian voices and the steady hum of starship engines filled the corridors. The war outside was not over, and the human soldiers remained vulnerable. Yet within these walls, a quiet revolution was underway. A shift in perception, a rewriting of ancient narratives. Vol'tal allowed himself to envision a future where Veridian medics would no longer turn away from wounded humans, where the scars of myth gave way to the bonds of shared survival. It was a future wrought from the union of science and empathy, tempered by the hard lessons of history. As Ryan's eyes opened fully, focusing on the alien forms around him, Vol'tal felt the unspoken connection that transcended language and species. Here, amid the sterile lights and humming machines, the demons of legend were dispelled by the healing hands of those who chose to see beyond fear. The room seemed to breathe with renewed energy as the medics continued their work, each movement a testament to the fragile hope kindled in the hearts of all present. The ancient archives remained silent, their warnings preserved, but the present spoke louder. A story of resilience, understanding, and the possibility of peace. Vol'tal stepped back, his gaze lingering on the recovering soldier. The resolution was not merely medical, it was cultural, philosophical, and deeply personal. The Veridian medics would treat wounded human soldiers, not because they were compelled by duty alone, but because they had learned to see the humanity beyond the myth. The soft hiss of the life support systems and the faint pulse of the healing protocols filled the space as the first rays of a new day filtered through the observation windows. The war would continue, and the challenges ahead were many. But here, in this moment, a new chapter had begun, one where ancient fears were met with courage, and the wounds of the past could finally begin to heal. Vol'tal's thoughts drifted to the archives once more, recalling the warnings etched in stone and data. Perhaps, he mused, the greatest threat was not the species that had once terrorized the galaxy, but the fear that such legends could foster. In that light, the new healing protocol was more than a medical breakthrough. It was a declaration of hope. The Veridian medics moved with quiet purpose, their hands steady as they tended to the fragile human life before them. Outside, the stars continued their silent vigil, witnesses to the unfolding story of two species bound by conflict, fear, and now, the tentative promise of trust. And so, with the dawn of understanding breaking through the shadows of myth, the Veridian medics stood ready, not to turn away, but to heal.